I just saw how design can become a powerful tool to address environmental challenges in a way that resonate with a lot of people on not just a visual level but also an emotional level. I believe that kind of science provides that foundation of truth, and design is my facet to, or kind of provides me the pathway to understanding. So I feel like merging both of them allows me to address like complex environmental issues in a way that's grounded but also inspiring.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. And today we are talking to Louise. Louise is a sustainability designer. Louise, please introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. So my name is Louise. Most of my colleagues do know me and call me by Shark. I am a sustainability designer and an environmental scientist. So I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you so much for taking the time to come on. Before we get into your project, can you tell me a little about like how you got into sustainability design?
Yeah, so I was born and raised in the Philippines. So naturally, I've always been surrounded by such beautiful things in nature, especially the ocean. So my journey definitely has taken me through several career paths. Often people are confused about how all of those things connect. I did start by studying veterinary medicine. My parents are both veterinarians as well. So animal welfare has always been like a core passion of mine. I love caring for animals, but as an ocean child with like a deep love for the ocean, my interests naturally expanded to larger environmental issues like marine conservation. And so this connection led me to pursue my environmental science and policy degree. While I was working in that field, I did see firsthand kind of how complex and interconnected environmental challenges really are. And although science is a very strong suit, I did recognize that science alone couldn't solve these problems. And I was thinking of a better way to influence behavior and foster collaboration. And that's kind of how that led me to design. And so I decided to pursue my MFA in design for sustainability at SCAD, and I just saw how design can become a powerful tool to address environmental challenges in a way that resonate with a lot of people on not just a visual level, but also an emotional level. So that's kind of the story of how I ended up in design from veterinary medicine.
Interesting. I kind of read about that, and it's
Mhm.
interesting. Your career path's really interesting, like how you ended up here. So, you were talking about science and creativity. So, how do you blend science and creativity in your design approach?
Yeah, so I approach design with systems thinking mindset. I do combine research and data with storytelling. So, for instance, when I work with complex data, I often use a lot of illustrations, infographics to make it more digestible and engaging.
Mhm.
I believe that kind of science provides that foundation of truth, and design is my facet to, or kind of provides me the pathway to understanding. So I feel like merging both of them allows me to address like complex environmental issues in a way that's grounded but also inspiring. So that's kind of how I blend science and creativity.
Interesting. Yeah. So I come from a science background too. My
Awesome.
undergrad, I did engineering, but which was like a
Okay.
mechanical
I do
engineering.
understand.
Yes, I completely understand what you're talking about because like sometimes when you're doing these things, it's nice to have like that background so that you
Yeah,
have like a base about what you're
definitely.
doing.
I think
Yeah,
it definitely gives you a more holistic understanding of what you have at hand if you come from multiple backgrounds. Yeah.
definitely. I agree. Can you share some of your early experiences or projects that shaped your design philosophy?
Yeah. So I guess prior to SCAD, I did have this one project. But before that, I'll mention kind of, so my pillars when I approach design is, like I mentioned, research, engagement, and design. So I think that the combination of these things is what allows me to address not just environmental but social challenges as well. And as if I when I think back, I think of this one project I had with a sea turtle conservatory back in my hometown. I did use GIS, or Geographic Information System, kind of to collect layers of where turtle sightings were seen, and also a layer for public beaches. So that way I was able to compare. So in case you didn't know, sea turtles generally come back to the area where they were born. And so it's a threat, especially if that area is a public beach. So then I
Okay.
used that tool and also gather data. So when I was a practicing veterinarian, I did go with my parents as resident veterinarian for that area. So I was able to gather a lot of data on sightings and what the threats are. So were they deceased, unfortunately? Were they injured? Was there plastic around them when we found them? Were they entangled in something? So just the combination of that research part, the data, and also GIS, so the data in that, as well as collaborating with the local community, really opened my eyes into understanding that design isn't just about creating something that's visually appealing, but it's also about kind of engaging people and making data accessible and, more importantly, actionable. So I think that's one of the first projects that opened my eyes to understanding how I can blend science and design.
Interesting. So what are some of the like the unique challenges and opportunities of working across these disciplines?
Well, there's a lot. Obviously, with a lot of disciplines come with a lot of perspectives. And I think the most challenging thing as a designer is how to bridge all of those different perspectives. So you're dealing with a lot of people, but you're also dealing with a lot of different scientific data and cultural values, and even as designers, like the aesthetic considerations, of course. And I think all of which bring their own complexities and sometimes conflicting priorities. And that, I think, is the most challenging to deal with. But I think it's also very important to be respectful of scientific rigor and accuracy, while also ensuring that you uphold kind of the cultural context that you're in, and also make sure that the design you make remains accessible and, of course, visually engaging. So I think as a designer, we definitely go beyond just the aesthetics. And it's often a misconception that people have of designers, but I think it's important to understand that it's a balancing act and it's very difficult because each discipline has its own language and priorities and expectations, not to mention your own expectations of yourself
Mm-hmm.
as a designer. So it's challenging, but I think it's also where some of the most exciting opportunities emerge. So very fulfilling work, I think.
No, I'm sure it is. Like I haven't been to the Philippines yet, but I was in Mauritius, and the marine life there is amazing. And I've seen a lot of people just like polluting it and things like that. And my friend's a local from there, so she's very passionate about preserving the reefs and
Yeah,
the
definitely.
whole life around the place. So I
Yeah,
understand what you're talking about.
I know. It's definitely a call to action when you see it unfold in reality, right?
Yeah.
It inspires kind of that urgency and passion in you.
Yeah. So, how do you stay updated with like latest developments in both like science and design? Like you were talking about geo tracking,
Yeah,
and now there is
definitely.
AI, and
Definitely.
uh, so how do you stay updated with like technology, and how do you think the AI how much impact AI had on sustainability design so
Sure.
far?
Well, personally, I stay connected with both fields by participating in different conferences. I still take online courses to the day, engage with different professional communities. Definitely there are a lot of passionate individuals who are very like-minded. So it's nice to stay connected. In terms of keeping track of recent research and local community engagement efforts, I love reading research papers and all of those things. What else? In terms of I think AI is definitely a tool. Of course, there are ethical implications. Even as we speak, we are still kind of navigating like the ethical responsibility that we should uphold in terms of AI. But I think AI could be a very powerful tool, especially in sustainability. I think it could be helpful in helping you understand how to bridge different perspectives per se, or how you might approach things. So I'm excited for what AI could bring into sustainability. That's definitely something that is emerging, and I can't wait to see what's on there. But yeah, I think just I guess one also another challenge is now that I live in the United States and I'm most passionate about marine, it's been difficult for me to stay connected, especially with the Philippines across the globe. So I try really hard to keep updated with new research. I'm also a board member for the Coral Reef Alliance. So that's kind of one of my facets to keep track of new research and for me to stay connected in terms of trying to, or in terms of me just giving my best with where I am at the moment, just because I'm not as connected to the ocean as I used to be. So yeah, there are multiple ways, and I'm glad that technology definitely bridges that. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So what advice would you give aspiring designers who want to get into design for sustainability?
I think the most important thing is to embrace adaptability. I think one of the most important skills to have is to be open to change and to be willing to learn new skills as you explore different fields. One thing in sustainability is that you'll realize that everything is related to each other. That's why systems thinking is such a strong tool and lens in sustainability, is because sustainability isn't its own thing. In fact, it's weaved into everything. It's not just my job as a sustainability designer to be responsible for sustainability. It's everybody's job. So I think just being open to change and being willing to learn would be such a strong suit for you to have. And also, I would say that you should prioritize collaboration. Like, because it's an interdisciplinary field, collaboration is key. And some of the best solutions, or most of the best solutions, come from very diverse teams working together, offering different perspectives. And I think lastly is to embrace resilience. I think making a difference takes a long time, and you'll face a lot of setbacks. But if you do stay focused on your mission and believe that your unique perspective and your unique skill set is your strength, then you can use that to drive the positive impact that you want to achieve. And I think while I acknowledge that climate change and the threat that we have on our ecosystems are very immense and growing, I believe that humanity's capacity to innovate, adapt, and create lasting change is just as strong. So kind of that's what I like to go by.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think that's a great answer. Uh,
So, Buhay Donsol is my thesis baby at SCAD. It delves into kind of the intersection of ecotourism and marine conservation. So, let me just share my screen real quick before I get into this. Okay, so I do have my thesis on my portfolio, which you can easily refer to if you want. I've also made my full research paper available on ResearchGate, so that would be a good read as well if you want. But basically, Buhay Donsol aims to foster a shared commitment to environmental stewardship, among different stakeholders. So in this project, I really tried to leverage transition design and interpretive design approaches to uncover stakeholder dynamics, evaluate communication strategies, and propose interventions to enhance marine conservation efforts and awareness. Often, I guess what you see with ecotourism initiatives or anything with the local community is that the local community voices are not elevated, and that's what I really wanted to tap into. I wanted to put the local community at its heart. So I believe that the heart of my project is the people. And I think the through collaboration with the stakeholders, I was able to create a meaningful connection between people and nature. And it was just a very fulfilling project for me. So yeah. What else would you like to know about Buhay Donsol?
Could you take us through like the major things that you uncovered or and the steps
Oh
that you're
yeah,
taking?
sure,
Yeah,
definitely.
yeah.
So obviously with any research I did start with some gaps. And true enough, the dynamics and relationships between the stakeholders involved are were not yet well understood or well documented, and so that's kind of where I wanted to start. So my primary research plan was really to uncover these things before I went into even conceptualizing a design. And through that, or through, and all of these gaps were just from secondary research. And so to create my primary research, I did have to create an engagement map to understand all the stakeholders at play and who I needed to talk with. And that also was one of the most challenging things because I was conducting this all the way in Savannah, and this is all the way in the Philippines. So I can't even imagine how I dealt with the logistics. But because I did have a trip to the Philippines, but this was prior to the class that required us to come up with a primary research plan. So it kind of forced me to come up with all of these things earlier. Then it was very stressful, but then in hindsight, I guess it did give me more time for iteration and to really think of how I can involve the local community. And as you will see throughout my research, throughout every step, I never imposed a design or a concept on my own. It was always co created with the locals. And so from this, I did, like I mentioned, leverage the transition design framework to make sure that the visions all the way into the interventions are co-created all throughout. And so I conducted quite a few things. So from surveys, field observations, interviews, narrative research, all of those were done. And one of the things I'd like to highlight is how I bridged the gap of me being across the globe. I did create a peer researcher toolkit and I trained some locals on how to conduct interviews. So I gave them a whole kit. It was translated in their local dialect, in Tagalog, in English. It was I taught them how to conduct an interview, but also gave them a version where they could just give them out and people could fill it out. So whatever worked for the locals. And in that way, I was able to gather around 40 interviews. So that was quite a lot of data also to visualize. And I
Yes.
also had to include all the data I gathered from my surveys with 82 field observations from 5 different participants who observed the area for me, and as well as my own observations. And from that, I was able to kind of structure my framework of data analysis in a way that gives justice to all of the data I got. So it's the normal affinitization, but I did have my own framework of kind of trying to understand the root cause. So as designers, we always like to look for the root cause. That's why we have the 5 whys, the many whys of understanding what really is the problem. And so the extra step I took was after affinitizing all of the data, I structured it in that sense so I could understand what the root cause was. And in that way, I was able to address the gaps that I had. So from that, I was able to understand what the dynamics were between the stakeholders. I was able to understand the gaps. I was able to uncover what their pain points were, what the their strengths were, and what I could leverage on. And from that, I was also able, or from that, I did then began the multiple co-creations that I conducted. So from all that information, I was able to conduct a co-creation with tourists, potential tourists, people who have been there and people who have not heard of it at all. This was also fun, also a testament to how technology is helping us. I was able to conduct this on Zoom and on VR. So because I wanted so many participants from different places in the world. I had people from different states. I had people from out of the country, from the Philippines. So we conducted it on VR, and that kind of bridged the thing that you normally miss when you're just doing things virtually. So we were able to move stickies, you were able to
Right.
write on stickies. So this was really fun actually. And then I did the same thing with locals instead. I did have to call them at very late hours of the night because of the time difference. But it was very impactful because I know that this intervention is an amplification of their voices. And I think that really helped them or helped foster community ownership because it was nice for them to see kind of their ideas come to life. And I was just there to make it happen. And I was never there to just impose what I think was right based on my bias. Same thing with the user testing. I also conducted one in Savannah. So for Earth Day, I've thought of different activities that could give me guidance on now the visual aesthetics of the whole project. So I was able to gather a lot of information and make sure that my visual identity and Buhay Donsol's identity is reflective of not just the local context, but also of what people want to see and how can I properly design it in a way that it will bring my message across or bring the heart of the people or the heart of Donsol's message across. So this was also fun because I was able to incorporate like illustrations, like my illustrations and all of those things. So I really felt that creativity was strong in this project, something that I don't often get to do. So I have like a basic service blueprint of kind of where these interventions can be found. It's suggestive, meaning all of the parts of my intervention can be flexible and can be moved around. But basically, it's all of just things that could be placed at different points in a service blueprint per se or a customer journey that could inspire that action. And all of these things were not just created by me, but was also created by the locals because if anything, they are more knowledgeable than I
Right.
ever could be. So yeah, this was really fun. So it was a complete or it was a complete redesign of what or not a redesign but suggestive elements, so from posters to handbooks to even to evaluation of what they can implement to make sure that every touch point in a customer's journey is not just informative of the experience but also informative of marine conservation in general. And it aims to kind of foster that shared commitment because I did recognize that the local community was very strong strong-willed in protecting the bay, but also by sharing their knowledge and their wisdom, we have the capacity to inspire that same action with the tourists. So that's kind of how the system worked throughout my whole thesis.
That's awesome. And you were talking about challenges like creating kids for locals to go interview and
Yes.
survey. How did that come about? Like, that's such an amazing idea.
That was very challenging. So first, I did think of conducting the interviews myself. But then, like I mentioned, I had class and I couldn't go there for like a day just to collect all of these responses and go back. So then I thought of, okay, what do you usually do when we can't meet in person? We do it virtually. But then this Donsol in the Philippines is a province still, and signal is really, really bad. And so I couldn't even get people on Zoom. In fact, some of them didn't even have phones or a laptop even. So that idea was also not the best. And so the next best idea I could think of was just to ask help from the local community themselves. So I asked for volunteers. I asked for people who are willing to help me. I think I had two two people who were very consistent and an extra person who would help me every time he could. So my big shout out to that family, the Nepomuceno family, who was really helpful in gathering data on my behalf. It was also them who helped me translate. So I speak Tagalog and Bisaya, so two different dialects in my country, but I don't speak Bicolano, their dialect. So it was really challenging for me to translate it into that dialect, but with their help, I was able to do that. And by doing so, I was able to gather more responses. Yeah, so even it actually also started as a questionnaire that they could fill out, but then I didn't even consider at first that some of them had difficulty reading or writing. So there were a lot of challenges that required really fast turnover to make sure that I gather as much data. But I feel like in terms of data, I did gather a lot of very insightful and I think sufficient enough to inform me of my next steps.
Yeah, and I don't think it's just like it's also really informative data. Like it's really good, correct,
Yes.
accurate data for what you're doing. And we just skimmed over it, but just so people understand, was this like a 3-quarter project,
Yes, this
or
was a
how
thesis
how
project.
long was your?
So the writing was 1 quarter, which is 10 weeks, and then everything else was another 10 weeks. So
Okay,
20 weeks,
okay,
I guess.
okay, okay. And like even the research part of it, we just skimmed over it, but it's it's amazing like how you've distilled it down from so much data to like, all right, I'm sure like that took you like a really really long time.
Definitely. You can't even imagine how hectic my Miro board looked like. The color coding was insane.
uh yeah, so what was like you're talking about collecting data and things like this, so but what are some of the other challenges that you faced while working on this project?
Um, one of the most challenging and the most time consuming thing from this thesis was once I finally dealt with the whole data gathering problem. So now I had the data, and then most of the data was in my local language. So it was either in Tagalog, Bicolano, some even in Bisaya. It was a lot of dialects. So then that was again another challenge because even if we do have the technology to easily translate things, when you translate things with like Google or like ChatGPT, you lose the meaning
Right.
sometimes.
Yeah.
So it was really essential for me to go through each and every single data point I had to make sure that when I translate it, I don't lose the meaning. Because I am, but in my research paper, you will see transcripts of all. But when I presented it, of course, at SCAD, I had to present it in English. So I had to make sure that the insights were understandable. And so in that sense, I had to ask help from some of my friends in the Philippines who are more well versed in the language than I am. I even asked help from my grandmother because most of the data that I gathered from, of course, some older, more experienced locals, were they had some expressions that I kind of understood, but not really understood the meaning per se. So I had to ask my grandmother to tell me what does this phrase mean, or what is the expression for? What is this metaphor? I don't understand. So it was a lot of. It was a village. It really took a village. Everything was co-created. Like I was just kind of the bridge and the means to gather everything, but I really couldn't have done it without the help of everybody who extended support for me. And this was a challenging feat, and I'm sure I couldn't have done it alone in that time period of 20 weeks.
I'm sure. I'm sure. And that's a sign of a good design project, right? You don't enforce a solution. You just gather the
Yes,
data and then the solution comes to you through the data.
definitely. Yeah.
Uh, so that's really nice. So regarding this, also, could you really quickly explain Buhay Donsol? Did I say it right?
Yeah, of course. Yes.
Yeah.
So, Buhay Donsol translates to life in Donsol. So Donsol is this bay in that area in Donsol, in one of the regions of the Philippines. And in Buhay Donsol, um, a lo- or Buhay Donsol, wait, no, sorry. Donsol Bay is one of the bays that whale sharks pass throughout their migratory journey. And so seasonally, people of the bay and tourists come to Donsol to witness such a majestic creature swim by. I would say of all the ecotourism, whale shark ecotourism programs I've been to, because I've been to quite a few, I think that they are so amazing in terms of upholding the triple bottom line. So people, planet, prosperity. They have a really good model for making sure that economically they're supported, but also not overstepping in a way that the environment is damaged. And they also take an extra step in informing all the tourists who fly from all over the world to make sure that they understand how big of a blessing it is to be graced by a whale shark. They do not feed them, they do not keep them at the bay, so they're very transparent about this experience being a by chance experience. So they'll take you out on a boat, but they always emphasize that this is not a guarantee, this is by chance. We don't want to disturb them, we just want to observe them. So I think they have a really good model that other ecotourism programs should really learn about. And that's also one of the reasons why I wanted to use them as a case study. Of course, personally, I'm already biased towards them. So I had to make sure that my secondary research was robust enough to really back up my claim saying that they have a really good model in place. So
Are these changes of your system? Is it being implemented already? Are you sharing
yeah,
it with the
so
locals?
I was able to pitch this to the Department of Tourism in my country. So it's still in the works at the moment. Of course, with any project comes funding and a lot of government meetings and all of those things for budgeting. But hopefully, one day, especially when I do have more capacity to go home, I would definitely love to be there when it's enacted. So, yeah,
Yeah,
it's still in the works.
I hope that happens, and I hope you get to go
Definitely.
check it out. And yeah, like I think if they spend a little money now, they can save a lot of money on like
Yes,
conservation and cleaning it
for
up
sure.
later.
For sure.
Uh, yeah. So
And I think one of the things I also appreciate about this research is that even if I did dive very deep into the local context of Donsol, I think just the frameworks that I used and the principles that I included throughout my research offers kind of that iterative process of feedback incorporation. So I'm sure that the dialogue among stakeholders go on. And I think all th- all the frameworks that I've used is not just specific to Donsol. I think one of the strengths of this research is that it's a study that presents a very replicable research design. So I hope that this also informs similar ecotourism programs worldwide because you can use the same frameworks I used and the same process I followed, but tailored to your local context. So I think that's also one of the things that I tried to do is as I was writing my research paper, I didn't just want to talk. I didn't just focus on talking about the things I uncovered in this local context. I also took time to kind of give the steps as to how and why I did it a certain way. And hopefully, this informs other research initiatives.
Anything else you'd like to add about marine conservation and anything else people should know out there before we sign off?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. And I really appreciate you for having a platform for designers like me to talk about their work. I think that's very inspiring work. In terms of parting words, I guess, yeah, I think we just have to stay open and adaptable to all the changes and really just believe that all of us have the capacity to make a difference, especially as designers, because we are blessed with such amazing tools, frameworks, design lenses that we can draw inspiration from. And I think one of the things that I really want to emphasize is to draw inspiration from nature's designs and processes, much like biomimicry teaches us. And I think by observing natural ecosystems, it's easier for us to create more resilient and sustainable solutions. So rather than fight against it, I think it's really important that we learn from nature instead. Yeah, I think that's it.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks for taking the time to do this again.
Of
And I
course.
hope the system is implemented and
Of
you get a
course. I
chance to go
hope.
check it out. Uh,
I hope
yeah,
so too. I hope
really,
so too.
thanks for
Thank you
being
so
here.
much. Thank you.
Thank you.